Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talking Race Walking. I have the privilege this episode to bring on someone I've chatted with here and there, but I've never really had the chance to have a long conversation. And I'm going to bring on a walker, a coach, and an author. And we're going to talk to Nancy Leo, a Canadian race walker, coach, and recent author, and that's why I've had her on, because we're going to talk about her book and a whole bunch more. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Noel, for inviting me.
Honor to have you on. Honor to have you on. So let's kick off things by talking about you. We're going to put people in the dark a little bit about this book that I've mentioned. We're going to, because that's really the reason I've got you here. But let's tell people about you. I know from the little I know about you, that you founded Toronto Racewalkers, a Canadian racewalking club. You yourself, I know, don't walk as much now, but you were an accomplished racewalker. I think silver and gold medalist at the World Masters. And you've coached for a good number of years, and now you've put some pen to paper. But tell me about how you got into racewalking.
Oh my. Well, I never liked running. That's right up. I was an elementary school teacher. I coached track and field. I ran with the kids when I did cross country, but didn't enjoy it. And you know, the big running boom of the 70s with Jim Fix, that just bypassed me. I wasn't interested. And I don't know, it was in the early 90s, I just started walking for exercise.
Yep.
And I was doing 6K 3 times a week. And my goal was to do it in 50 minutes. And I was somewhere 51 and a half, 52. And a friend saw, and I took a couple of courses at the running room because they did offer walking classes at one time. And once we actually had a race walker as the instructor, and I was just in awe of how beautiful it looked, how effortless and smooth. And then they stopped offering them, and I thought, oh, well, that's that. And I was entering charity races because 5K races.
Yep.
There was at that time, there was never a walking category. Everybody ran, but there were always a few people who walked. And so I thought, well, I'll just keep on going the best I can, but I just wasn't getting any faster because my first coach said there's that sweet spot of around, between 11 and 12 minutes a mile pace where no matter what you do, you're not going to go faster as a walker. So you either have to break into a run or start walking funny, which he called race walking. He was a running coach. Yeah. So anyway, this local sports store was offering a women's walking club. The owner was running marathons, and he'd hired this man. I don't know if you know Peter Pym.
No.
If you've ever heard of him. Well, Peter Pym is probably, a very high level coach. He actually coached the middle distance team in the Commonwealth Games, I think back in '84. But so he was our coach, and we would just go to the track, which is close to the store, and do 200 meters and 400. And it was funny because the owner's mother-in-law, said, well, you've got this running thing. What about something for the women? So he started this club for her. And a couple of them had been walking for a while. And I showed up the first night, and then Peter said to me, now, these gals have been walking for about a month, so don't worry if you can't keep up with them. Well, I took off and left them in the dust. Their noses were a bit out of joint, but I got a lot faster. And I did a race for the Baycrest Geriatric Hospital, and I put this in my book. I took off when the gun went, and we were going down a main street in Toronto, and there was a cop on a motorcycle in front of me, and I looked back, and I was probably 100 meters ahead of everybody, and I was kind of embarrassed, really. But I'd been chatting with a woman at the beginning of the race, and she introduced me to her son. He'd run, and he said, you should do race walking. I said, love to, but I don't know where to go. He said, well, I know a club. And I gave him my phone number, and he said he would phone me with the number of the coach. And he did. And I had my first lesson Tuesday, June 1999.
Oh, well, I guess so. You definitely know the date when it all started. So
I do. That was the date.
who was
And
that coach? Who was the club that you initially connected with?
Ontario Racewalkers,
Okay,
which,
well, I know them. I'm part of them now. So
yes,
who,
but
who
they
was
were not.
coaching?
Stafford was not the coach. Stafford was with the Tobago Huskies at the time, and the coaches were Jan Roos. And if you look, you'll see his name still in record books as a master.
I have seen that name.
Yeah, Jan Roos, his wife Mickey, and Joan Sutherland were the three coaches. So I walked all through June, and then I went to Australia for 6 months or 6 weeks to visit my sister, and came back at the end of August to get ready for school. And I was in my first race in the middle of September. It was a 3K, and I was so nervous. They were lining us up in order of seed times. Of course, being a newbie and having no seed time, they were calling a number, and nobody was moving. And then they looked at me and said, "That's you." And I said, "No, I'm this number." And they looked, they said, "You've got your bib on upside down." So, anyway, and then I was like panicking, and two of the other athletes kind of leapt to my chest, unpinned and repinned me. And I realized after that first race that the race walk community was very, very welcoming. I mean, there were just, more and more people they could get, the better. So that was it. That was the start. And Peter was my coach for a few years, but I basically had to figure things out alone, because one thing that the club, they did not do anything in terms of race preparation, psychological preparation. They didn't prepare a program for you or a schedule. That I got from Peter. And then I decided that I really wanted a real coach. So I asked Sherry Watts if she would coach me. And we had roomed together in Puerto Rico at my first World Masters. And she took me on, and that was, I did extremely well with her. And 2005 is when I set records and won three world race walking medals at the World Masters.
Yeah, one gold and two silver. So and just even because I did some research on you. So what were your best, your personal best for race walking? You said out of curiosity for just.
Yeah. Well, they're not spectacular, to tell you that.
Oh, that's all. We all know that's relative, just like
I
running,
know.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was 8:31 for 1500 outside, 8:34 indoors. I cannot tell you what my 3K time was. 30:25 for 5K and 1:03 and change for 10K.
Nope, those are solid times, and those are masters times for people as well. And how old were you when you were setting those?
55.
Well, there again, I think that puts it into perspective as well. And I think anybody who's out there listening, that perhaps is, listening to this because they're interested in the topic or just race walking in general. I think to put that in perspective is for anybody who hasn't race walked, go out and see how quickly you can walk, say just a 5K normally, and then
Mm-hmm.
try and imagine doing it in 30 minutes or so. So it's just like runners and just like race walkers now, it's all relative. So those are very decent
Yes.
times.
Yeah. And consider I did not start till I was 49.
Yeah,
That,
exactly. Well, I feel that I started later too. So
I know. And the thing is, I said, my gosh, why didn't I learn about this sport when I was younger? And I coach masters, although I do have a one young fellow I coach. Um, and most of them say the same thing. Why
yeah,
didn't I find out about this sport earlier? But it's just, I say we're like the bridesmaid, never the bride. the runners get all the glory. People make fun of race walking, and you got to have a thick skin to race walk. But
You do, and I don't think that has changed very much. I have an Instagram channel where I often put up videos, and yeah, it's funny the abuse or just sort of stuff that's thrown at race walkers, and I don't. It was new to me being a longtime runner, so it is rather unfortunate.
yes, but the thing is that if you explain to runners that you can get your heart rate up, as high as a marathon runner, that a race walker will take 180 to 200 steps per minute
Yeah.
and not do it for 800 meters, do it for 20K or 50K.
Yeah. Oh,
You try
exactly.
that. You
Yeah.
try that. And then they realize, oh, okay, maybe this is, and of course, then, I have athletes who come to me after years of running and their knees are hurting, or they do race walking and they have no injuries.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I came at it as someone who's run for years, and I still enjoy running. I mean, I enjoy both in terms of race walking. I just enjoy the fluidity and the challenge and the difference. But I mean, I'm quite happy to go. I love blasting a 5K or going out for a run where I don't have to think as much either. So I think I tend to be in
Yeah,
that middle ground where,
that's the thing with running, like
yeah,
as I
it's
mentioned in
different.
the book, every athletic event has rules.
Yeah,
I mean, if you knock the bar off in high jump or pole vault, doesn't count. If your foot hits the plasticine strip in your long jump or triple, doesn't count.
exactly.
So, and running has rules, but they don't relate to technique.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you look like as a runner.
No, you can
I
have the ugliest technique as long as you're getting from the point A to
exactly.
point B.
Did you ever see Paula Radcliffe run?
Oh, good Lord, the
Oh,
nodding. Yes, if anybody else
that
hasn't,
is
go look at.
body,
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
but she was successful, right?
Amazingly successful. And there's still a few elites out there that don't. I think there's another is it English or Irish female runner as well without perfect technique, but it works. So yeah, it's different, very different.
It's like Andre DeGrasse's coach, because he had that one arm that come kind of funny, and the coach was, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's successful. I'm not going to mess with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I had belonged to a power walking club in Toronto, and I then began teaching actually at the running room. They started up with the classes again. They stopped for a while and then they started. And as far as I know, someone told me they're not doing any courses, not even running courses anymore at the running room. So I don't know. But so I taught there for many years, teaching walking, and I taught race walking. We didn't go for a walk around the block and stroll right now.
Yep.
And one of my athletes then took over after and was coaching, and he gave up because he got frustrated. He said they just want to walk and talk; they don't want to exercise. Yeah, I know it's a social thing, but and then I guess it was 2011 I started the club. Um, we've had our ups and downs. Sometimes I've had two athletes. I've probably got about 13 now. There's a fellow in BC that I'm coaching online, but yeah, I never know who's going to show up. But I still love it. I mean, I wish I could do it.
I know, and for anybody
It's
that doesn't know, Nancy has her difficulties now, but I mean, she has race walked for quite a few years and coaches, and just as well, where in Toronto are you approximately? If people want to know about this club, and it's the
right.
Toronto Race Walkers, is that right?
Yes, yes. And then the other club is, of course, Stafford's Ontario Race Walkers. So
Yes.
I actually became the president of Ontario Race Walkers, and then it sort of they left, and everything kind of fell apart, and Stafford took it over. Luckily, thank goodness, to keep it going. Um, we train at Lawrence Park in the spring and summer, which is Lawrence and Avenue Road area. And in the winter, we're at the Toronto Track and Field Center at the 200-meter indoor track at York University.
Right. Yes,
So,
exactly.
and Stafford, so I'm more North York, East End, if you will, and Stafford is West End, Etobicoke High Park area.
Okay,
So,
excellent.
yeah.
And if you're not familiar with Canada or Toronto, folks, well, you should still look up at Toronto Racewalkers and Nancy. And so we've got your story. We know how you've been, you kind of got to race walking and some of your accomplishments. So what made you want to write a book about race walking? Because
Oh,
that's really why I've got you on here.
yes, I know. Well, I coach masters, and having gone through the National Coaching Certification Program, I'm a that's the other thing. When I started, I thought, well, I don't need to have any courses. I know enough to teach these adults. And then I thought, you know what? I'll be more taken more seriously, and I can learn things. So I'm considered a performance coach in athletics with a distance in or a specialty in distance. So I can coach marathon as well, but don't want to do anything with running. Um, I don't know. I was actually fairly mobile during lockdown, and I used to go for a walk every morning before breakfast with my Nordic poles. And I'm walking along the street and I'm writing in my head, about what I would teach about race walking to masters. And then, of course, I'd get home and I wouldn't write. But I did start during the 2021 lockdown, I guess. And there's no book. There's a lot of really good race walking books out there, but there is no book that is targeting masters.
That's true.
So
Very true.
I'm starting with the premise that you are 35 and up. Maybe you were a runner. Maybe you just are interested in learning about race walking. You don't know anything. So I'm taking you from A to Z, everything you possibly could need to know, including how to go to the bathroom in the middle of a race, which nobody ever told me. Now, I never had to, but there are things that you realize as you're doing them that nobody's teaching you this stuff.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write a book that would teach older people about race walking in a safe way, that, goes through my philosophy of having a good workout and recovery ratio. You cannot train a 60-year-old the way you train a 20-year-old. It's just,
Exactly.
bodies are different. They need special care. So I've come up with a system of 3 workouts a week, but each one designed to train a different system. And it works. My athletes are quite successful, although this year I'm taking a new tack with them because sometimes they get a bit anxious, one in particular. And so I said, our focus this year is fun. I'm just going to go out and have fun. Don't care if you win, don't care if you lose. Give me the effort, I'll be happy. And so that's sort of what we're going to be focusing on this year. And you start writing, and I mean, you've written books, Noel, so I don't know what your process is as a writer, but what I did, I sat down at the computer and I just wrote down chapters, type headings,
Yep. Yep.
this, that, and then just started writing. And after I had finished, I thought I'd finished, and then I realized one day it hit me, oh, you know what? I haven't talked anything about clothing or training in the weather. How do you train in the heat and the cold? What do you wear for the different climate conditions? So I made a new chapter on clothing in the weather. And then I thought I was really finished. And then it hit me one day, oh, you know what? If somebody's traveling by airplane to a race, they should know you got to take all of your essential stuff in your carry-on, your racing shoes, your team uniform, right? Because if your luggage doesn't arrive, you can always buy your toiletries and new clothes. But so I added a little paragraph, and my sister, who's a professional editor, shortened it, and my book designer managed to squeeze it in. So, yeah.
It's writing a book is a big project, and I I think I think we had different approaches. I was very much wanting to do it from the very beginner, and I think your focus on the masters is great as well, because I think we're starting to fill in those gaps, because I think just like you mentioned, there isn't a whole bunch out there. We've got, like Jeff Salvage here on his podcast with, so big shout out to Jeff. He's a great promoter of the sport in the US. has stuff on YouTube and books and videos. He's amazing. And then Dave McGovern in the US has got stuff.
Yeah.
But we're all kind of covering off different aspects of as well. So I think you're right. I think the Masters is a great sort of gap that you're filling with this. So I think I'm really looking forward to taking a look at it as well.
That's what Jeff said, that yeah, he said it's a refreshing look at race walking from someone who came up through the trenches. I've known Jeff since 2010.
Yep.
He and Rachel and Tim Seaman came to Toronto and did a clinic that I hosted. And I've done a couple of Dave clinics. I've assisted at Dave's clinics. As a matter of fact, I'm meaning to write to Dave because I donated money for his son's research for that disease.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So, and Jeff, Dave sent me a message and said, congratulations on the book and thank you. And I'm going to write to him and say, look, I bought your books.
You got to buy mine.
Buy mine, Dave, right? Tit for tat here. But yeah, I mean, putting a book together I am never going to make back what it cost me to produce this book.
No,
but my
no,
goal,
same.
Yeah, I'm sure you're the same. My goal is that I wanted to create a quality product and that it will be my legacy. When I'm gone, hopefully this book will still be around. And so we went with, different ideas. My sister's idea was the spiral binding. And that's something that really sets my book apart, because if you're looking at a drill and you've got a paperback, you got to weight it down because the book closes.
Yep.
My book stays open. Plus my back cover folds in and becomes a bookmark. So if you're reading on page 30 and you're, go to bed and you want to pick it up the next day, it's right there, right?
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
So there's some special features like that. And Kathleen, the woman who designed the book, I can't say enough about her. And then of course Jeff, with his absolute generosity, said, you can take any picture you want, Nancy. So I just turned his website over to Kathleen and she went through it and picked. And I mean, when I saw the book actually, printed in my hands, and in one place she's got 2 pages of a picture of a judge standing under a tree and one lone race walker going by and the judge with his arms folded, scrutinizing. And it's just brilliant. The other thing I wanted to do was put a little bit of levity in. So I found a company called Cartoon Stock, and you can buy cartoons. And some of them are from the New Yorker or various places. And I had a list of about 15, and we shortened it to 5 because it cost me, I think, $375 for 5 cartoons. But I can reproduce them 5,000 times. Not that that's going to happen, believe me. So I know. Sample in my chapter on nutrition. There's a overweight fellow sitting on the doctor's table in his underwear, and the doctor is saying, yes, nuts can be good for you as long as they're not preceded by the word dough.
Yeah, especially with race walking, where, like you mentioned before, you do need a little bit of a thick skin. So I completely agree.
Yes.
So it's good to have a little bit of humor in there.
And the other thing is that there's a number of, I talk about things that happened to me, like, personal anecdotes as a race walker. And I, talking to Bettina Calgary, I believe her name is, there's two people that are really promoting Masters sport, not necessarily race walking, but I met them back in 2004. Sherry Watts and I did a research project for the Petro-Canada Sportif Conference, and it was on coaching in Masters, the discrepancy between demand and supply. And it was really revelatory to hear stories from people saying, I can't find a coach, or nobody wants to coach me because I'm old, right? And one woman was an athlete, and she said she went to the professor, the coach of the university, and she wouldn't take her on. And she said, I was posting better times than some of her university athletes, but she didn't want to coach me.
That's funny, isn't it?
Anyway, they've written a book called Coaching Masters, I think, or Masters Coach, something like that. And they wrote some chapters, but they also asked certain people. And one of them was a man named Michael Stones, who's a professor emeritus from Thunder Bay, I think psychology. And each author of a chapter had to contact a coach and get a coach to contribute. So Mike contacted me. So I've contributed an article on sort of how I approach it, psychological stuff with my athletes. And that's in the book. So I was actually published before I wrote the book, now that I think about it, because I'm in that book. But yeah, it's a very good book. It's not something that the layperson would want. It's quite technical, but it's very good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I've got about 10 minutes left or before we tie this up. And one of the two key questions for you. One being, who or why should you get the book you've written? It's written for masters. Now, what kind of master? Is it somebody who's starting out with race walking, or is it somebody who's been race walking for a bit and wants, more technical and training advice? What kind of master's athlete is it for?
I'm actually both. I think I cover the basis for both.
Okay.
I think it's, primarily for someone who's trying to learn, the ABCs of it, but also because I have focused on areas that other books haven't, like strategy and psychological preparation and how you deal with situations, like what happens when you get shown a paddle.
Yep.
What happens when you get a red card? How do you react? How do you handle these things? So I believe that people who have been race walking for a while would still get some benefit from the book. They'll probably learn some things. I mean, Jeff even said that, which I found very flattering, because he said
Jeff's a great guy, and that's honest input too from him.
Yeah, because he said, I even learned a few new things. And so I thought, whoa, if I could teach Jeff something, because yeah, he's amazing. It's funny, after his podcast, someone asked, Jeff, why don't you walk anymore? And Nancy, you too. So I replied first and said, well, I can't answer for Jeff, but I've had 7 spinal surgeries and I can barely walk. No, never mind race walk.
I know.
I use a walker. I coach from my walker because I can sit on it. I have a wheelchair when I go to the now the Romano races, because from the ferry to the race is a kilometer and I cannot walk that. So one of my athletes pushes me in the wheelchair. but I love the sport so much. I couldn't bear to, pun intended, walk away. I just had to stay involved. So being coaching gave me that connection.
Well, I'm glad you stayed with it. And before we forget as well, I will mention Jeff, who's helped both us with books. Please find him at racewalk.com. That's Jeff Salvage, and he's on YouTube as well. Really great guy.
Oh,
he's helped us both. And Nancy, I'm going to have to update my book now. My book's really geared at, like, really just people who have no idea where to start and where to get the info. So I'm going to have to update mine and have another edition where I add your book into it now. So.
Okay, great.
I love it.
Yeah, because mine is the same. I mean, I start with someone who knows nothing, right? And tell them, and the first thing is go and get your shoes, right? That's number one.
Exactly.
And then go and get a physical checkup first.
Yes, and those are always good things. Exactly. Start slow, start gradual with any kind of physical activity.
Yeah, that's something I learned from my first coaches was, technique, because I was a pretty fast power walker, but I was a slow race walker at the beginning. You have to bury your ego, because I find a lot of power walkers, and I've coached some over the years, and they don't want to stay with race walking because they don't want to give up what they think is their speed initially.
Yeah.
If they could only realize that down the road they're going to be so much faster. But everybody has a different psychological viewpoint on things, and yeah.
Well, I've got a couple of minutes left. The final question, of course, is where do people find your book, Nancy? Where's the website? Are you on social media? Where do we find your book? And once again, I also wanted to make sure that What's the title? So when they go look for it, it's Nancy
Right.
would know. And what's the title of your book?
It's called Racewalking 101,
Okay,
a handbook for the master's age athlete.
perfect.
And
And now where can they find you?
yeah, I'm not on social media.
That's okay. We're putting you out there, and I'm doing the best to get
Okay,
you out
I
there.
am now, I guess.
But
Uh,
where is there a website they can find you?
they go to TorontoRacewalkers.com or just Toronto Racewalkers, Google that, it'll come up.
Perfect.
And if they live, you know, in the GTA, they would contact me directly
Okay.
and I can deliver it to them, or they can pick it up at a race. I will see them and they'll save the shipping. But if they
Perfect.
live far away, then there's a QR code for them to scan, and that will take them to my printer, who has a fulfillment service, and he has deals on shipping, so it's a lot cheaper than if you went to Canada Post. I took my proof copy to Canada Post just to see what it would cost to mail it. With tax, it was over $16.
Yeah, it's not cheap anymore, but you're right. I'm on the page right now, folks. And if you go to TorontoRacewalkers.com, you can see the price. It's in Canadian dollars, so probably people cheaper for those in the US
Yep.
to order. It's got a great photo of the cover and some information about it. So please go visit the website. And Nancy, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'll be pushing as much as I can to get the word out about your book.
I cannot thank you enough, Noel, because as I said, I am not on social media. I'm one of these. I kept saying to Jeff, I'm an old lady now. He was saying he was too, and I'm figuring he's 57 now. So when I met him, he was not old. I'm 74, so I've got a few years on him. But yes, thank you so much for promoting the book, and any opportunity I have to talk race walking is delightful. And I hope to see you at a race sometime.
I hope to connect. I'd love to get a signed copy. So I think that's the deal. We'll try and connect next time I'm in Toronto area. I will find you or let you know, and we'll get a hug happening and a signed book exchange. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Thanks so much,
You're
Noah.
welcome. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy walking, and please tune in for any upcoming episode. We'll have lots more talking about race walking, different kinds of walking, and we'll make it interesting. Take care, all.
Okay, great. Thanks.
That's it, folks. The end of the podcast. No walkers have been harmed in the recording of this podcast. And of course, at the moment, we have no sponsors or supporters at this point to fund all this amazing podcasting. But if you're out there and have a race walk company that produces some sort of race walk apparel product or something you think race walkers would love, get hold of us. We'd love to have you on board. Give us a holler.